So while we were gone, we learned that Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty. She was found guilty on 5 of 6 charges. And we also got this little gem that dropped after the trial. So take a look. This is reported in Law and Crime. Federal judges order release of Jeffrey Epstein's civil settlement at issue in lawsuit against Prince Andrew. So let me explain what that means. There was some sort of immunity that was granted to Epstein's high-profile clients. And so they say in the article, federal judges ordered the unsealing of a 2009 settlement agreement that Prince Andrew has claimed insulates him from civil lawsuits accusing him of having sexually abused a 17-year-old girl. The more than a decade-old deal signed by the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and the prince's accuser Virginia Giuffre is said to have shielded broad categories of Epstein's powerful associates, including royalty, from civil liability. Quote, because Prince Andrew is a senior member of the British royal family, he falls into one of the expressly identified categories of persons, i.e. royalty, released from liability under the release agreement, along with politicians, academics, businessmen, and others allegedly associated with Epstein. Quote, the prince's lawyer, Andrew B. Bretler, wrote in a memo on October 29th. Now, so you're about to hear, they go on to say Prince Andrew and Jeffrey will face off in a federal court on January 4th, 2022. So it appears like even though they had some sort of immunity, perhaps they no longer have that immunity. And again, the update is that judges ordered the release of the details of whatever that agreement was. So we're going to be able to see what that agreement was. But there's a little line in this piece which floored me. And I wonder how many of you will notice it right off the bat before I explain it. But here, I'll give you it. Senior U.S. District Judge Loretta Preska, who is presiding over Dershowitz's case, and Lewis Kaplan, who is presiding over the Prince's, ordered the release of the 2009 civil deal on Wednesday, scheduling the document's public release for January 3rd, 2022. Okay. The judges' names, Loretta Preska and Lewis Kaplan. Those rang a bell for me. You know who they are? These are the exact same judges who railroaded Stephen Donziger. So these are the same judges that we know, in no uncertain terms, are deeply corrupt. At least one of them is part of the Federalist Society. You know, it's the far-right judicial group. They have connections to all sorts of corporate interests. They've wantonly disregarded the Constitution and the law in railroading Stephen Donziger. What are the chances that these are the judges who are going to oversee aspects of the Epstein case? Now, again, to be fair, in this particular instance, they were the ones who ordered the release of the 2009 civil deal, so that's good. But I got to tell you guys, I'm trying my best not to go full Alex Jones as I read that they're involved with this case, because that makes me believe you're not going to get an honest conclusion. You're not going to get, decisions that are unbiased and objective and fair, because they're as bad as can be. I mean, again, when you look at the details of that Stephen Donziger case, they had no regard for justice at all, not even close. But listen, perhaps an even bigger part of the conversation, so if this goes off the rails, I wouldn't be surprised at all based on the fact that these judges are involved, but the even bigger part of the conversation is, okay, they got Ghislaine. Ghislaine Maxwell, without a doubt, knows where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, and maybe even not metaphorically speaking. She was the closest associate that Jeffrey Epstein had. She knows exactly who was involved in criminal activity and the details of those criminal activities, and there are, I have no doubt about it, just records on top of records within records about whichever a billionaire or CEO or politician or academic were molesting harassing, raping young girls. So, and I said this the second we got the news about Ghislaine Maxwell, the Fed should cut a deal with her. Hey, you tell us we're going to go after the big fish. We're going to burn the house down. So you give us the information on the big fish, and then you get a lighter sentence. So, I mean, that's sitting there waiting for it to happen. Like, all this information is just available. And I have no doubt that she knows this stuff, and I have no doubt that what she has, well, I would say she has no incentive not to squeal, but we all know what happened to Jeffrey Epstein, so maybe she feels like if I say anything, I'm donezo. But, you know, everybody thought she was donezo up front anyway. Everybody thought they'd somehow find a way to axe her anyway, and she's still kicking at this point. So, but then, look, a broader conversation opens up, which is, are the feds even interested in real justice and truth? And the answer is probably not. And the answer is probably that there are people who were on the payroll. There are people who are part of that good old boys club who are among the feds. So if that's the case, they don't want the truth. They'd rather get a smaller fish and not the biggest fish, because I have no doubt she knows all the details about Donald Trump, for example, and what he was involved with when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. He was on the flight logs. We learned that recently, that the airplane pilot was like, oh yeah, we saw him on the plane plenty of times. Bill Clinton, we already knew he was on the plane. So, in theory, she could cut a deal where we get Donald Trump, we get Bill Clinton, we get whoever else, whatever other billionaire politician was involved. But my guess is somebody up that chain of command is going to be like, well, pump your brakes, hold your horses. We're not doing that. I'm actually rewatching the series The Wire right now. Wonderful HBO show that came out, I guess, in like 2004, around there. And yeah, you find, the more you watch, the more you realize, like, oh, the cops who are actually trying to do a good job are getting stonewalled because there are cops who are up the chain of command and up the hierarchy who are getting paid by the drug lords. So they can sort of axe any portion of it that they don't want to be unveiled. And you get the sense like maybe something like that is happening with the feds here too. Because there's been, and we covered the stories, but you had Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister, was in the meeting with Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein when Steve Bannon told Jeffrey Epstein, you were the only one I was afraid of when it came to Trump's campaign. And Jeffrey Epstein was like, as you should have been. Why was Ehud Barak there? Well, because one of the theories is that maybe they're Israeli intelligence. Maybe the whole Epstein outfit was Israeli intelligence. You get dirt on these politicians, you can hold her over their head, and you can, you know, basically use that as leverage and get whatever you want from the American government. Very possible. But Ghislaine Maxwell is in a position where she could tell all. She probably fears for her life, though, so maybe she wouldn't do that for that reason. And maybe there are no terms of a deal that are on the table because secretly, whoever's in charge or somebody along that chain of command doesn't want the biggest fish, because the biggest fish will make sure, come hell or high water, they get protected. It's funny, one of the things where there appears to be near universal agreement is that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself. I remember when that happened, the left and the right. I mean, it was like the quickest truce I've ever seen in my life. Everybody on the left and everybody on the right was like, this dude didn't kill himself. He was the CEO of Elite Sex Crimes Incorporated. So he knew all the stuff about elite sex crimes. And the elites were probably afraid, oh, he's gonna blow the whistle on us. And so some action was taken, to say the least. And then you get into the specifics and the details of how he passed, and you realized it's not consistent with suicide. But anyway, I digress from that. By the way, if you like this show, subscribe. If you like this show, click the like button, leave a comment, and support the show if you can on Patreon, because without a doubt, this segment is one of the many segments that will instantly be demonetized, because they lump this in with the most insane conspiracy theories you could think of. The stuff that I'm telling you right now is definitely on the blacklist in terms of do not let anybody talk about that. I remember I did a segment, whatever the last segment was that I did on Epstein, when it was uploaded, instant demonetization. I was like, well, we know because Epstein's in the title, that's what's going to happen. So anyway, if you support the show, please help out in those respects. I'd really appreciate it, because what YouTube tries to do is disincentivize you from talking about this kind of stuff. That's what they do. They don't want you talking about this stuff. In the same way, they don't want you talking about Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Israel, almost anything involving foreign policy, they don't want you to touch. So if you could help out on that front, I'd really appreciate it. But listen, Ghislaine knows where all the bodies are buried, and she could talk, but my guess is there are a bunch of hurdles in the way, and those hurdles are enormous, to say the least. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.